PhD, and Dr. Shah, Dr. Rolando is the dean of our school. Welcome. See, I think we can start, and then he will join us anytime.
Just give me a moment.
Yeah, please. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We are extremely happy to be starting today our Global Business Lecture Series 2021. 3 p.m. in Colombia, midnight in Abu Dhabi, 11 p.m. in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia time, 10 p.m. in Egypt in Cairo. We have a lot of our colleagues from that region, and we highly appreciate that due to the time difference you're here. We have other people from Latin America and Central America as well, Mexico City, Argentina. Great honor to have you here. Once again, this year, Global Business Lecture Series 2021 is going to be focused on the MENAT region, Middle East and North Africa. We're going to have experts from different countries from the region. We're going to have people from Dubai, we're going to have people from Qatar, from Iran, from Egypt, from Turkey, among other countries. Part of the speakers, part of the invited people we will have embassies, we'll have academics, we have business people, we have filmmakers. This year, we're also going to have a virtual business fair, networking spaces. We're also going to bring successful cases. Entrepreneurs are going to be sharing their experience. So yeah, it's going to be a great and fantastic journey. So please follow us. You're going to be receiving all the invitations. Before beginning with our provost words and our dean words, there's so many people to thank for making this happen. We started this last year, and yeah, we are extremely happy to be, working with them, and we're going to continue working with them. As you guys know, North Africa, Middle East, and North Africa is a region that has great economic diversity and includes both oil-rich economies, such as the Gulf Cooperation countries, and countries whose resources are scarce, relative to the population, such as Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, or Yemen. Colombia has institutional presence in this region with embassies. Not as many embassies as we would expect to or want to, but we have presence in Morocco, in Algeria, in Egypt, in Israel, in Lebanon, in Abu Dhabi as well. That's why we chose the region this year. It's key to the global economy deserves that, and the current situation also asks or forces us or takes us to begin to look at different regions and diversify as a country. Okay, so that said, I would like our provost to give some words, introduction to the session and to the opening for the sector series. Provost Dr. Daniel Toro, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, James, for the introduction. I have to excuse myself because it seems like my computer just had a glitch and I had to restart it. So as I said, I'm very glad to be here and welcome to our very important guest today, Dr. Shanak Mahmoudi Hanifi from the History Department at James Madison University, with whom we have been working with this university for several years now, and we are very glad to strengthen this relationship. Thank you to James Perez also for the organization of the Global Business Lecture Series, and with the Dean Rolando Ariza also for all the preparation of these spaces. And last year, our School of Business here at UTB started the Global Business Lecture Series. This is a space that seeks to promote the dialogue with national and international experts on the global business and cultural order through multidisciplinary perspectives. that enrich relations between Colombia, Latin America, and the rest of the world. This year, we focus on the Middle East and North African countries. These regions constitute great potential for the development of Colombia's positive agenda that includes trade, investment, tourism, culture, sports, south-to-south cooperation, environmental issues, and safety. The elements that I want to highlight is that the Global Business Lecture Series contribute to internationalization at the UTB and other core strategies, including our institutional development plan, especially but not limited to the visibility at the UTB, but the relations with the other institutions, embassies, government, universities, and also to these strategies also help us to develop strategies to strengthen our appeal as a university that can become the destiny for international students. Also, as a contribution from the UTB to the diversification of the strategic Colombian agenda in international relations and strengthening the ties between the regions. Of course, we have a lot of challenges to overcome, posed by not just the global economy, but also the current environment of pandemic situation, but also the diversification of economic partners and access to new markets and collaboration networks and research networks. And of course, based on this agenda that the School of Business had prepared, I'm very confident we will advance in these results. So again, Professor Sanaa Mahmoudi, welcome, and thank you for sharing with us all your talks about these relationships and the current situation today. So welcome, and I hope you have all a very fruitful session today.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for those words. Highly appreciate them, and highly appreciate you are giving like the words, to start the whole lecture series, like the opening ceremony. Now we'll continue with Rolando Riza, the Dean of our School of Business. Rolando, microphone is yours.
Thank you, Professor James. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rolando Ariza. I am the Dean of the School of Business. I am glad to see all of you here at Global Business Lecture. As our Daniel told us, the Global Business is a series of virtual conferences taught and directed by the School of Business at UTB. As he said, its goal is to strengthen the relationship between Colombia and the rest of other countries in the area of business, technology, politics, society, education, among other things. And last year, we had the opportunity to start and develop 13 Global Business Lecture Series, in which international doctors and professors spoke mainly about China. This year, as Professor James and Mr. Daniel told, experts we talk about the countries of the Middle East and North Africa. So I have the great honor to open this session today with the conference Along Durée, History of MENA and the wider Islamic world. So welcome and enjoy. Go ahead, Professor James.
Thank you, Rolando, for those words. We're also extremely happy to have you here. Okay, so now let's. I must say that I'm extremely happy to be, in our first session with a great expert, with somebody that I admire a lot, somebody that I have read all his papers and his books, and we follow him a lot, and it's extremely we're extremely honored, flattered to have you here. Dr. Shah Mahood Hanifi. He's an associate professor of history at James Madison University in Harrison, Virginia, United States. Um, he received the degree of Bachelor of Arts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He then attended the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, received his PhD back in 2002. His thesis, Interregional Trade and Colonial State Formation in 19th Century Afghanistan, won the 2004 Gutenberg E Prize from the American Historical Association from this doctoral thesis. That's just an example. Not only he has won many awards, but he's also a great person. Again, we're happy to have you here, Dr. Cha, and it's a great honor for you, for us, that you are giving us the opening. Thank you again for being here, and microphone is yours. We're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna learn a lot. Yeah.
Gracias, Profesor James, y gracias, Dean Rolando y Provost Daniel. Estoy muy contento de estar aquí contigo. Hablo un poquito español, pero no es suficiente para este programa. Entonces, inglés. So thank you very much, really, everyone at UTB for organizing this event. It's a real honor to be involved in this program and to represent JMU in what we hope is a increasingly robust set of collaborations between our universities. So I would like to try to share my screen, Professor James, if I may. I wonder if the screen is legible.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. What I hope to do, using certainly many more images than I think are necessary, is to provide a long-term, wide-ranging historical view of the Middle East from a business perspective. And in that sense, I'll treat the Middle East in the context of the history of capitalism, using a historian of capitalism, a historian of global capitalism, Fernand Braudel. And then I'll organize my thoughts on the basis of that framework through time, through deep time and a kind of wide geography, coming over something like 5,000 years in about 30 minutes. So I'll set my timer, and I certainly hope Professor James will interrupt me to remind me of our schedule. Okay, so I bring the analytical framework of the Annals School of Historians to bear on this subject matter of capitalism in the Middle East. And Fernand Braudel is a leading figure in the school of history writing developed in early 20th century interwar France that examines history from at that time, kind of a new perspective, not dynasties and wars, but more popular social and economic history with wider time frames, more conceptual questions, a focus on ordinary people, not elites per se. And Fernand Braudel is my, I would say, primary guide to the history of capitalism. And he began writing about economic history in his first work on the Mediterranean. He basically charted trade across the Mediterranean and saw the Mediterranean connecting Europe and Africa, not dividing it. And so he went on to write what he is best known for, that is a magnum opus, 3-volume history of capitalism that lays out a conceptual framework that is very useful for us. The conceptual framework is 3 parts across 3 books, something like the diagram in the bottom corner. The first book deals with the long-term structures at the base of the economy. That is geography, that is the demography, the sources of food and clothing and fuel, the origin of systems of exchange, indeed the sort of birth of money and writing as an outcome of increasingly sophisticated kinds of exchange at the local level over the long term. The second book is about markets and different instruments of exchange, the relationship between land and money, market zones, questions of animal labor versus human labor and technology. And the third volume deals with kind of what we think of more as capitalism. That is something that is different than something previous forms of economic exchange. The Industrial Revolution has a lot to do with it. Europe's relationship to the rest of the world has a lot to do with it. Increasing concentrations of violence and urbanization and colonization have so much to do with what we call capitalism. And so essentially, the first book deals with long-term stable structures that last on the order of thousands of years, material life. The market layer of the economy changes more frequently, but still rather slowly, let's say on the order of hundreds of years. Capitalism as a modern phenomenon changes very quickly on the order of decades or a lifetime. And this framework of global capitalism has been explored through the anthropological writing of Eric Wolf, who studied global labor migrations during the Age of Empires. And again, sort of treating global capitalism from its popular participants who are often written out of history, as the book cover indicates. So it's this framework that I brought to bear on my original thesis work that James mentioned, where I wrote about colonial market relations and trade, credit and debt relations in 19th century Afghanistan. And it's this framework that I'd like to bring to bear on our talk, using kind of a long term, a market short term, and then a kind of recent, fast moving historical perspective. Okay, we'll be moving quickly, and I hope to leave time for questions. To narrow in our conversation, I'd like to focus on the Nile River, which is here. I hope you can see my laser pointer, and the Indus River. But we can also sort of mark the perimeters of our region by other bodies of water, other rivers like the Oxus River or the Caspian Sea, or by mountain ranges such as the Hindu Kush, the Caucasus, or the mountains of the Hejaz. And so within this framework, mountains and rivers are most relevant over the long term that give rise to economic activity and the thing we call capitalism. And so I'm interested in the mountains and rivers of Afghanistan in particular. These are images from the Hindu Kush, the tallest mountains in the world, with some of the largest rivers in the world originate in the high Himalayas in Tibet, and the Hindu Kush spawns a number of rivers, the Kabul River in particular. So I'm interested in mountain products and mountain societies, particularly forest products, particularly timber and water use. And so what Braudel helps us see is access to use of water, water storage, use of timber for fuel, for furniture, for housing are really significant foundations for the economy, and we need to give them heightened attention. Mountain ranges in the broader Middle East include mountain ranges in the Hejaz. This is a road from Mecca to more interior Taif. These are the Zagros Mountains in Iran, the Mount Lebanon in Lebanon, and again, the Caucasus between the Black and Caspian Sea, between the boundaries of kind of, let's say, Iran and Russian interests in the Middle East. Looking now at the long-term history, we can really begin around 3100 BC, when we know that major river-based civilizations were taking shape along the Nile, along the Tigris and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, and along the Indus. And each of these ancient civilizations was unique on the one hand, but also similar in terms of large-scale labor organization for large-scale irrigation works. But it's the exchanges between these regions that's most significant for us. In the middle, what you see is some early writing. This is a token for beer for a temple worker in the Uruk dynasty of Mesopotamia. It's writing. It represents a kind of coupon, a ration card, which large-scale labor, sophisticated state organization, writing as a form of money. Writing and money is the relationship between Mesopotamia that this image indicates. However, Mesopotamia, which we see in satellite view in the upper corners, was built using abundant supplies of timber from the Himalayan mountains in what is now Kashmir, the Kashmir region of the upper Indus. Large scale timber export from the Indus region to the Mesopotamian region give us a sense of sophisticated, extensive long distance trade networks 5,000 years ago that are relevant to us. In the Nile, the ancient civilization, there are multiple kind of pharaonic dynasties in Egypt. But for example, the Queen Cleopatra was an avid consumer of jewelry, lapis lazuli jewelry. Once again, that comes from the Hindu Kush, that comes from Afghanistan, very limited number of locations in the world where lapis lazuli is mined. And it's been mined there for thousands of years, exported consistently to Egypt, that we see in the pyramids, hieroglyphics, as well as jewelry. Sophisticated mining, sophisticated labor, sophisticated transport systems to get lapis from Afghanistan to the pharaohs. We also have writing in the form of papyrus. This is the sale of a donkey in 126 AD. And if we want to understand the economy at its base level, we need to understand animal labor. Camels that transport wood through the mountains, as we saw previously, donkeys that transport water through Cairo are relevant for us, and we'll see more about animals shortly. So by the time we arrive at the origin of Islam in the 6th century AD, there are millennia of commercial exchanges between the river civilizations and throughout the Mediterranean that Islam is aware of, taps into, capitalizes upon, builds upon, and expands in certain ways that we can understand. Again, maps of the Phoenician Empire, Alexander the Great's empire, and the Roman Empire, all centered on the Mediterranean, that Braudel helped us see as a commercial lake. relevant to many civilizations across time. Islam's origin in the city of Mecca through the figure of Muhammad in the early decades of the 7th century AD, beginning in, let's take 610 as a starting point, when Muhammad began to receive revelations in the cave Hira that led in 622 to the Hijra migration to Medina. And this is the beginning of Islam as a political formation, as a supra-tribal organization. And what we need to appreciate is Muhammad's historical experience as a businessman, as a not just political leader or religious a prophet, but as a sort of a commercial person. Mecca was a thriving commercial center, then expanding because of a shift in the monsoon trade. Meccan commerce was of a substantial scale where thousands of camel caravans transported multiple kinds of commodities. Popular use commodities such as camel leather, elite commodities such as frankincense, over hundreds of miles with sophisticated credit mechanisms, sophisticated kind of profit sharing, investment insurance organizations, guards for the caravans, all to say that Islam provides a legal protective structure for commercial activity. Islam grew to be a city-based commercial religion in many ways. This is not to downplay the spiritual elements, it's to highlight the commercial basis of Meccan society and the fact that Islam's growth tapped into earlier trade networks. By 750, Islam as a geographical formation stretched from Spain to Central Asia, the borders of China. The Abbasid dynasty that reached its heyday in the early, let's say around 800, was an expansive, very diverse, integrated commercial trading zone that every year Islam organizes, and one foundation of Islam is the Hajj, an annual pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina that we must see as an annual trade fair where businessmen make all kinds of arrangements, from marriage arrangements to commercial arrangements, where new information is exchanged about markets and commodities. The Hajj is a commercial enterprise. Connecting land and sea routes is what we need to see into the infrastructure of early Islamic imperial experience. Baghdad was the center of the Abbasid Empire. Baghdad was the center of the world in many ways. Paper that Muslims encountered when at war with China in 751, at the Battle Talas in Central Asia, Muslims adopted paper exchange, took it back to Baghdad and expanded a tremendous book business. Paper is a labor-intensive, very complex technology. Bookbinding involves leather, and these manuscripts were ordained with all kinds of jewels, so gold, and so craftsmanship. The labor behind libraries is what Baghdad represents. Baghdad was the center of an empire that was becoming global. This is an astrolabe. It's the piece of technology that was both a compass, a kind of inclinometer as well for altitude at sea and on land, and always oriented towards Mecca. Muslims must pray 5 times a day oriented towards Mecca. The astrolabe does that. Muslims, there's a new calendar that comes into play with Islam. It's a lunar calendar. So the sort of constellations of the stars, which are useful for navigation, as well as terrestrial directional orientation, are all kind of packaged in this mini computer. Again, high engineering in Baghdad. Baghdad represents a constellation of many sciences: geographic sciences, biological sciences, ophthalmology, engineering, early industry. And it was just a giant center of knowledge accrual. The libraries and bookstores of Baghdad were world-renowned. The Mongols ended, literally up in the right-hand corner, the Abbasid dynasty in 1258. The Mongols, however, adopted what they learned in the encounter with Islam. That is, for example, the Persian language. And the Mongols mint coins in Persian with Persian inscriptions. Now, the Abbasid Empire covered modern Iraq and Iran. And what Islam involves is a whole set of engineering and hydraulic engineering sciences and technologies in particular. Islam is an urban merchant religion, big cities beyond Baghdad. We can think of Cairo, Istanbul, as major centers, metropolitan centers, dependent upon a water supply and a rural agricultural food supply. That irrigation channels, these underground qanat systems, were developed in Iran around a couple thousand years ago and spread around the world through Islam, even to the Americas. So hydraulic engineering. Around 1000 AD, Islam begins to get a firm foothold in India. This is consequential because India's demographic concentration, its markets, became incorporated into Islam. There was a sort of jump in scale in the commercial potency of Islam once North India came into the fold. Gradually, between about 1000 and 1500 AD, significant development. New hydraulic technologies, new crops like rice and sugarcane and bananas. And it was sort of an explosion of production. But it was also an artistic explosion. And much of the Islamic conquest, although very much commercial in nature, did have a military component, and horses were a significant military technology, but also a cultural technology. And there's a whole set of accoutrements and sciences and a cultural orientation to the horse that grew up in these early centuries that we see captured here with Persian miniatures about the horse. Similarly, the camel becomes crucially important for the overland trade networks. And the encounter with India led to a great camel breeding experiment along the banks of the Indus River around 1000 years ago, with high kind of veterinary science brought to bear crossbreeding between 2 humped dromedary camels, Bactrian camels, and 1 humped dromedary camels, to lead to a super sort of large but progressively infertile camel for a broader now transportation circuit and network to traverse. Early Islamic mapping is a central part of this formation. Geographic knowledge information about the growing extent of the Islamic world. Maps of the Indus River, maps of the Mediterranean, we see captured here, all from about the 12th century AD, all reflecting a high cartographic atlas of Islam tradition with different regions now mapped in great specific detail. This feeds into market integration and commercial integration directly. And we can see that the overland trade routes throughout the world involved the Middle East intimately in the 11th and 12th centuries, as this slide indicates. The Mongol interruption to this world trade system is certainly an interruption, but it also was a windfall of integration in the end. The Mongols are often referred to and their successor regimes in China, the Middle East, Europe, and Russia as a kind of first stage of globalization in many ways. And again, the horse and the destruction of cities, the destruction of agricultural hinterlands, the destruction of Khanate underground irrigation is a big problem for the Muslim world. It took a long time to recover, but recover it did. And beginning in about 1500 to about 1800, we see three major Islamic empires take shape. The Ottoman Empire, based in Anatolia, modern Turkey, the Safavid Empire, based in Iran, the Mughal Empire, based in India, are three empires that share cultural substance, economic resources, and technologies in a fascinating way. The most important thing for the Ottoman contribution to this Islamic trade system really involves the Mediterranean, and it involves Venice as a node to the markets of the Mediterranean and Europe. Essentially, the Ottoman Empire connected Venice to the markets of China and India, and thus we understand Marco Polo now from a sort of a different perspective, that is a global trade perspective, through Anatolia. And the Ottoman Empire is also important for its control over Egypt and its progressive loss of control over Egypt as the 18th and 19th century wear on. The development of the Suez Canal in the 19th century is a critical moment for global trade that we'll discuss in a second. The Ottoman cartographic tradition, aquatic, nautical cartography, is legendary. The aquatic maritime cartographer Piri Reis is most famous, and some see his maps to be of global oceans, where we can even see the coastlines, some theorize, of South America mapped in the early 16th century. The Safavid Empire, based in Isfahan, Iran, is most notable for its silk production, intensive silk cultivation in the Caspian forests of Mazandaran near the Caspian Sea. The Armenian global merchant diaspora network cycled Safavid silk products into Europe, where Safavid Iranian silk products, tapestries, carpets, textiles become an object of global consumption. Isfahan, capital city, again becomes kind of the center of the world. In Persian, the phrase Isfahan nifsa jahan, Isfahan is half the world. We see, again, irrigation, major bridges, the Haju Bridge over the Zainda River, and massive urban development along the lines of Islamic cities. The Mughal Empire is most notable for its capital cities and elite architecture, the Taj Mahal and capital cities of Agra, Fatehpur Sikri, Lahore, are giant centers of commerce. And the incorporation of India into the sphere of Islam is just vital once again, and India benefits from that. I often tell students, if a Martian landed on the planet in the year 1600 and found the first person and said, take me to your leader of the world, it could be Akbar in the year 1600 for his power, commercial, cultural, military, and otherwise. At the end of these, the life of these empires, let's just take a moment and realize that the Muslim world included Africa, Eurasia, and Southeast Asia. There are, as the screen indicates, Sunni and Shia Muslims. But for us to understand Islam culturally, I just need to say a couple quick things. The first is that we have three major cultural groups that we need to understand both separately and in an integrated way. Arabs, Turks, and Persians, each with their own language. Arabic, primary, foundational, scriptural, sacred language. Persian, the language of intellectual philosophy, arts, and really it's Persian that's the glue of the Islamic system. Turkish languages, Ottoman Turkish and modern Turkish, are relevant. These three groups generate the states, sort of Persianate states, early Arab empires, and sort of Turkish empires. But we must think about stateless groups and peoples. The stateless groups of Berbers in North Africa, the mountain people, the Berbers of the Atlas Mountains, the Kurds, the stateless Kurds across Anatolia, Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq. Their own language, neither Arabic, Persian, or Turkish, but draws upon all of them. And the Pashtuns that straddle the Hindu Kush borderland between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So we need to think about major cultural groups, smaller ethnic groups, states and non-state people, Sunni and Shia Muslims, as well as non-Muslims, Christians and Jews, intimately incorporated, organically incorporated in this system before Europe comes. Often charted to Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798 in the Battle of the Pyramids. But it's the British Empire that we see mapped as a global phenomena, an empire connected by railways, steamships, and cultures of consumption. Print cultures, but also new commodities, new forms of labor migration, new forms of war, industrial warfare, joint stock corporations. The British East India Company is what colonized India, for example. In terms of commodities, most people focus on cotton in Egypt, related to the American Civil War and the global sort of 19th century, cotton in India, that is Gandhi's use of cotton for nationalistic purposes. And certainly textile production is most studied for the development of capitalism. I'd like to focus on something else, that is opium, which is basically a kind of a legal commodity, but it's now, of course, a black market sort of narcotic commodity. And what we need to understand about colonialism and imperialism is its formal and informal articulations. And opium becomes a kind of money or currency in the British Empire, in the Opium Wars with China, the first one of which is 1839 to 42, which is the same year as the Afghan Wars. And it's really about a global balance of trade, the Opium Wars with China. And today, opium as a commodity in Afghanistan, as part of a global imperial let's just keep opium in mind to connect to Colombia and the coca plant for US imperial strategic projections. Colonial labor migrations, the Lebanese are most important. Lebanese brought to South America in the multiple thousands in Colombia, especially Brazil, throughout Latin America, the Lebanese commercial diaspora, very much connected to the homeland, very much connected to French colonialism. Joint stock corporations, the Indo-European telegraph that makes communication between Europe, kind of 1869, so important for the overall global economy during this period. The defensive development, that is the Middle Eastern governments taking out large loans to build new militaries, to buy new equipment, industrial military equipment, to hire new military technocrats, and ultimately go indebted. And this is the beginning of first and third world developments in the context of capitalism. Cores and peripheries are taking shape. Cores of colonialism, frontiers of colonialism. The business of war, the business of trade, the business of tourism is big business in the colonial era. Tours of the Nile, tours of India, hunting safaris, decimate the wildlife of India. Mountain climbing, big business, Mount Everest, for example. I'm going to run through these very quickly because they're maps of mountains and Afghanistan. And my work is on Afghanistan. I'm interested in the book that it's online, you can find it easily, is about Afghanistan as a fringe space for global imperialism and capitalism, not fully colonized, but affected by colonialism. So a factory, a single industrial complex that changes market relations and labor relations in Afghanistan in the context of British colonialism. Two big British wars in the 19th century, where the British lost and did never formally colonize Afghanistan. So I study new forms of money, new relations between paper money and silver-based money, the British Indian rupee, new kinds of debt, credit and debt relations, commercial speculation. I was interested in nomads and camel caravans at this time. But there's great pictures of early industry that is relevant for me now because of steam power and progressive deforestation. The world's railways and the world's steamships led to deforestation. And the Amazon is a victim of global industrial production, as well as the forests of the Hindu Kush. Afghanistan is a wood culture. And there's so much about the economy of wood that's relevant. World War I brings British and French colonialism into conflict. Sir Lawrence of Arabia and aerial surveillance. It's really oil and water that we need to think about in the 20th century to understand Palestine and Israel, which is a real marker at the end of World War II. And so I kind of read Palestine and Israel, not through ancient religious conflict, which is not productive, but through natural resource discrepancies, water discrepancies, mobility discrepancies, access to markets, and the irony of Palestinian labor building the sort of infrastructure of Israel and not being able to use it is a sort of epitome of capitalism. It's what Marx would call the industrial reserve labor. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were into big development projects, sponsoring them throughout the world. This is the Aswan Dam in Egypt. that was a product of Jamal Abdel Nasser's reign in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It built this dam. It makes Lake Nasser, you see pictures of. But Afghanistan was also heavily dammed through the Helmand Valley Project and the United States Morrison-Knudsen Corporation. And I study this now, big dams in Afghanistan. But it's oil in 20th century Iran that's most relevant. And we go from early oil discovery and exploration in the 1910s and 20s to the real industrial growth in the 30s and 40s, leading to the 1950s, where the nationalization of Iranian oil by Mohammad Mossadegh led to a coup in Iran, sponsored by the CIA, that initiated a series of covert interventions by the United States around the world. Many associate United States foreign policy during this time to a military-industrial complex. That comes to bear on the Middle East, if I could just skip to the 2001 era here very quickly. So thinking ahead now from 2001 to the future, as we get from the present to the future, so to speak. The distribution of a digital sort of economy, the Middle East is in the dark largely, that's important. Global population distributions, questions of Turkey being in the EU or not, a member of NATO, yes, Brexit, kind of all of this demographic and geographic information, a la Braudel, is important for us. The Middle East is now a kind of subject to a heightened arms and militarized, securitized economic profile in its upper tiers, Gulf states, but so significant for the economy. The securitization of natural resources, the timber trade, the militarization of societies, of the securitization of the police, the destruction of urban infrastructures, the kind of environmental impacts of war, new labor migrations in the Gulf, in Qatar, to build the Qatar World Cup stadiums, laborers from Nepal and Pakistan, so relevant to the Gulf. Today, nuclear power, just today, Israel admits to a nuclear power attack here in Natanz, in Iran, going forward. Be clear, the United States transferred that nuclear technology to Iran as a matter of policy during the 60s and 70s when the United States and Iran were allies. Be clear that intellectual exchange and technology transfer are a big part of how empires work. Pollution in the Persian Gulf through wars, Gulf wars and oil spills are relevant for the overall market profile. Our ancient now port cities of Beirut and the unexpected explosion of a sort of fertilizer tanker that decimates Beirut, the ancient port on the Mediterranean that we began charting thousands of years ago. And of course, the vulnerability of the Suez Canal and the evergreen tanker that got stuck and held up world trade is a way to end here, this presentation. Okay? So I'd like to conclude my presentation. I apologize for going over. Thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Shah, thank you so much for such a great presentation. This is just, I'm going to be honest, and as I always tell my students and my colleagues, every time that I see this type of presentation, and I love it, it makes me of course, keep praying that the pandemic is over, but take on a plane and go to the region and visit all these places and keep on studying this fascinating topic. What you professor just did is just, and I know that I'm speaking by my no personal opinion, but I'm receiving multiple feedbacks through different channels. Different experts are saying what Professor Shah did is just something fantastic. You took us to the whole region, and we visited, we traveled with our minds. I, I felt like we were there. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll do this session in the near future, face to face.
So much, James. I hope so too.
Okay. So we have some questions. Well, several comments here and comments. Not a question by now, but certainly I must say how delighted I am with this historical background. Congrats. Thanks, Olga Patino. He's one of the most important and super experts here in Colombia as well. And thank you for being here, Olga. Thank you for your comment. She also asked about your book, which I went ahead and I sent the link to the book that you wrote. Odette Gidi, my best regards to her. Somebody that we admire a lot, and we have done multiple things with her. Expert. I'm glad to see her here. Um, Thank you, Dr. Hanifi, for the great presentation. I learned so much, which is just part of what we do. Great, very enjoyable, thought-provoking, fantastic, excellent. Marianne has a quick question here. She says, basically a comment. I know it's a sensitive topic, but I'm wondering whether or not colonialism was a good or bad thing because it contributed of the exchange of ideas, but at the same time, it brought many conflicts as well. If you have any comments on that,
Well,
thank you, Marianne.
yes, Marianne, thank you so much for that observation. How complex. I don't know if it's a trick question, because it's one of those questions that begets secondary questions, and fundamentally it depends on perspective, I would say. And because one thing we see is various expressions of colonialism, things that resemble colonialism and imperialism throughout time. If we take certain characteristics of colonialism and look at them generically, we can find elements. I sort of therefore suggest that because it's so recurrent, indeed, many see the United States as a neo-colonial empire, there must be something that attracts certain individuals to it. There must be some motivation and some reward for the colonists, those who are colonizing, those who are profiting from colonization. So for them, perhaps it's a good thing. But once again, we need to think about the populations affected by colonialism, who typically find their livelihoods diminished, their agency in economic and political terms demunitized, their mobility patterns decreased, restructured, their monies become increasingly worthless, increasingly indebted, increasingly homogenized market spaces, cash crop production. And so, like everything, I think we need to be analytic, and it's not whether it's good or bad, it's how it's good or bad for whom.
Dr. Shah, thank you so much for your answer. We have another interesting question from Olga. She's asking, which might be the future of the region nowadays regarding the rise of new powers in the world, such as India and China?
Well, I appreciate the observation, the question there, because I'm not a policymaker or prognosticator, but some people say the 21st century is sort of for China and India to determine as the ultimate powers, prospective world powers here. Now, the relations between India and China are complex and controversial. The relationships between India and China are, in many ways, conditioned by geography, mountains and rivers, and the Tibetan Plateau, and wars and boundary disputes. And indeed, we just saw in the high Himalayas, Chinese and Indian troops at war. The Karakoram trade route from China to Pakistan as part of Pakistan's development, 5 and 10-year development plans is critical. China's role in Afghanistan for mining, if those are interested, the Mes Aynak copper mine in eastern Afghanistan is, like China in Africa, gigantic investment, gigantic, as well as India investing in the dams of Afghanistan to this day. So China and India in the Middle East are the market space of the Middle East, critical. And again, Egypt's an African country, it's North African. And Chinese capital and Indian interest in India and Africa are clear, are clear. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just, we are 4 minutes, and I appreciate the attendance for staying here, but this is so interesting. We could be here hours and hours. We love it. Professor Shah, Professor Odette, she's making some comments that I know you've seen, but yeah, for everyone, yes, basically she's saying, and again, Odette, we expect to see you here pretty soon. I love you. It is so necessary to step away from the traditional Orientalist views and narratives of securitization and understand the region in a more critical and historical approach.
I applaud that comment.
Yeah. And modern European, Odette also says, modern European Zionist colonialism has been the biggest threat to the region this past century.
I appreciate both comments and critical interventions. And, it is sometimes difficult to talk about politics and the economy in the same breath, and sort of the commercial impact of Zionism and Israeli arms exports and the kind of policies between Israel and, UAE and sort of the Bahrain potential for a free trade zone and Saudi Arabia's role in this with Israel. It's so important to critically understand the international forces that come to bear on the regional policies between Israel and the Arab world, between Egypt and its neighbors and Saudi Arabia. And so, we have to triangulate Israel with a kind of peace treaty with Egypt that's very important, United States brokered, and United States relationship to Saudi Arabia revolving around oil, that's critical. And of course, the Gulf and Gulf War, Iraq, and again, the observation of Israel as an economic actor, and its import is one thing, but ideologically, Zionism as, a political, both potential and problem for economic actors in the region, it is necessary to critically address in a calm, reasoned manner, in a way that really takes us beyond short second or a couple minute answers. That discussion requires more intellectual space than is often devoted in journalism and even sort of blog academia, where the analytic, intellectual, historical basis of these politics is often ignored. And so just thank you, Odette. I look forward to communicating or meeting you someday and learning from you. Clearly, brilliant insights. Thank you.
You do. Rest assured, you will do, Professor Shah. Yeah. Another quick question. Again, I don't want to leave without asking this question or without sharing with you this question. It's from someone that I also need to thank for making this happen. It's a great friend. He's a great person, and we have many projects together. Dr. Felix one, and Felix he's asking an interesting question. He's saying, okay, yeah, we most of the students or the business people who are here are, these are their first approaches to the region, right? So he says, uh, what about if somebody would love to learn more about the region? What are some, maybe like some books, movies, resources that they can start, that we can start with? So your recommendation for all those people, who want to keep on taking this route, international business, international relationships, keep from the story perspective. So recommendation.
Yes, well, there's a considerable literature about, let's just say, the mercantile infrastructure of Islam and the big Islamic cities of Baghdad, for example. Really abundant literature, and I can certainly direct people to bibliographies. The JMU Library has bibliographies for kind of regional studies purposes. Now, what we need to remember is the regionalization here. Because, for example, Afghanistan is often associated not with the Middle East, but with South Asia. And Russian, Caspian Sea, often Central Asia. And so we have to be careful when we look for source material to include the precise locations or issues of your concern. So often when you search for things about the Middle East, it comes down to just Israel. It's as if almost nothing else exists except this question of Israel, and that's really misleading. So for students, the first thing to remember is the category itself. What is it that you're looking for? Is it really about the Middle East, or is it North Africa? Is it about the Nile, or is it about Islam? What regions are you interested in? And so that would be the first point of reference. The classification, what you identify to study, determines in many ways how you study it. We began this conversation with the Middle East and North Africa, and Turkey was inserted. We went from MENA to MENAT, and Turkey. Well, this is important because boundaries are fluid. The boundaries of the Middle East are sort of flexible, depends on what kind of questions you're asking. And it's completely relevant to bring Turkey into the Middle East and North Africa. I'm glad you did. And Turkey, its relationship to the EU, it's been admitted, but then not fully granted admission, and now, no. And so those would be my first bits of advice. Felix, and thank you for asking. I'll be happy to share resources that I make available to my students with you or with anyone who's interested. And again, many research libraries have abundant online resources, University of Chicago, Columbia, Harvard, Yale, NYU. Okay, thank you, Felix.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Juan. And Professor Shah, I went ahead and I shared your, not your short bio, but the link to your profile at JMU, so they can see your areas of interest and your the subjects you teach at all. So yeah, some of the attendants will be emailing and contacting you. Okay, guys, so it's 4:12. Thank you for staying. Thank you for asking. You are the center of this lecture series. What a great beginning. I'm extremely happy. I won't get tired of saying, Professor Shah, it's a great honor. We hope to see you back and see you soon in the near future. We can shake hands. Hopefully I can be there in Harrisonburg soon. And we're keeping our finger crossed. to be there soon. Again, tomorrow we have another session, wonderful session. Please join us if you can. Hopefully, yes, you can. And keep an eye on our social media. We're going to be sharing the full agenda in the next few days. Once again, thank you so much. It's a great honor. It's a great pleasure. Best regards, warmest regards to everyone. Professor Shah, it's a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank
James.
you, everybody.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias. I'm great Spanish. Buen español.
Teshakar Ederim. Bye-bye.